The Fort Wayne skyline has been distinguished by the Lincoln Tower since 1929. With its lofty size, Art Deco design, and revolving beacon, the Lincoln Tower is the downtown area's prominent landmark. Its architect, A.M. Strauss, set out to create a building that had a strong presence and solid foundation, characteristics that were necessary to provide reassurance during the Great Depression. The Lincoln Tower stands as the predominant example of history preserved in downtown Fort Wayne.
The Lincoln Tower got started as an idea back in the mid-1920s. Lincoln Bank, which was the old German-American National Bank, and its name had changed after World War I, but they were growing, they were expanding, they were merging with the Trust Company and becoming Lincoln National Bank and Trust. And they were looking for a larger office, something that really said, we are a modern bank, we are a successful bank, and we are a place where you should put your money.
That was always the bank that we used, I think, is when I was a kid, and it was always a grand space. It was a little bit like going into the Pennsylvania Station. You went from one very unique atmosphere on the street through this portal, and you were in a very different kind of place.
The bank president, Mr. Bushing, at that time, decided that what he really wanted was a bank building that looked like the Chicago Tribune building in Chicago. New building, very modernistic was what they called it at the time. And he said, let's get one of those here. Let's get a little Chicago Tribune. So the story goes. So he actually commissioned a number of local architects, wasn't real pleased with the results, found a company out of Cleveland called Walker & Weeks. They submitted a plan in conjunction with a local architect, Alvin M. Strauss.
Everything that he did, all his work that he did, was outstanding. It was different, it was unusual, it was something that hadn't been done. He used his own ideas.
He was only about, I'd say maybe 5'6", wore a mustache, a very heavy mustache, and very alert, very intelligent, and certainly a fine architect. And he surrounded himself with some wonderful engineers, architectural engineers, and they could design any kind of a building and attain that kind of a reputation in this part of the country.
So the construction, was contracted, they were going to get underway, and then the stock market crashed. And, what do you do at that point? And I think to our benefit, Mr. Bushing said, well, we obviously still need to proceed. We still need a bigger bank building. We must show people that we have optimism about, our ability to stay afloat. And even as the Depression became scarier and scarier, the construction continued. So by 1930, when the building opened, there had already been a few bank failures in town. And suddenly here was this new bank opening up that in this large building, the largest one in the state of Indiana. And it gave a measure of confidence that I think helped to allow it to ride through the Depression. I think there were 8 or 11 banks, something like that at the beginning of the Depression. By 1935, there were 3 left. So, and Lincoln was one of them. So the building helped to boost morale. It helped to boost morale for the whole community. We've got the tallest building in the state. It's a modern building. We're going to continue to move forward. We're going to continue to progress because that's what we do in Fort Wayne. The marketing materials from the dedication tell us how many tons of electrical wires were used. The fact that there was hot and cold running water in each room, and all sorts of things that at that time made it a very modern building. And in fact, basically gave us a building that is still very usable today. And I think one of the things that you have to look at when you're looking at continuing to use older structures is, do they have the things that we still need for today's needs? And I think because it was such a modern marvel at the time of its construction, those things were put in place that make it very usable today.
It was created with the idea that buildings ought to have, about their decoration, a thematic program. And so you find on the facade of the building there are some bas-relief panels that depict the life of Lincoln, for instance, on the spandrels. But then you go inside and there's this wonderful brass screen that separates the lobby from the main banking room. And then the main banking room itself has got a decorative program where you've got murals that depict the idea of the sun as the source of of all life, which is, I suppose, sort of an allegorical reference to commerce in a way. But it's, it's just a great example of a building where everything has been carefully worked out as part of a single decorative scheme, from the overall form of the building down to the smallest detail about the decorative finish of it. Everything is of a piece.
And if you stop to think, the year that they put that up, which is when, you know, the year I was born in, I mean, they didn't have the equipment to do what they did today. You know, I mean, they got cranes today that go to the top of the building. You know, they didn't have all that stuff then. Most of it, I was reading some of the articles where some of the, or most of the mortar was brought up by wheelbarrow, you know, up ramps that they made.
I guess what I marvel at is the workmanship coming from a construction family. And when you go downstairs, you know, this building was built in 1 year's time. But as one friend of mine who happens to be a contractor in town and had a lot to do with building this building said, but you got to remember, when this building was built, 5 people were standing downstairs waiting to take one person's job upstairs because of the Depression.
Being in the construction business, I can certainly admire what they did when they built this building, because you could not build this building in a year today. You could not find craftsmen and people or companies who could build all of the intricate parts that it takes to put a building like this together in a year's time today.
The building is very interesting from the fact that they realized it had a personal effect on people coming into it. They could have a strong appreciation for the art, for the style, for the Art Deco that you found throughout, even in the banisters and railings. Again, unbelievable work. But the designers also built the observation deck up top, so people could go up and get a view of everything. I mean, from that observation deck, you can see up past the Coliseum, well into North Fort Wayne. Or you can turn around and look down South Fort Wayne, and you can pretty much see down to Southtown Mall on a clear day. And east and west, New Haven looking east. West, you can see pretty much down to the interstate. Unbelievable view. And of course, in that day, it would have been fascinating because downtown had far more buildings, far more industrial and residential structures. And so you really got a feel for how the town was put together.
A perfectly beautiful bank. It was the pride. We were all so excited about it. During the war, my brother and sister-in-law were wardens who went up in the tower once a week with their sketches of enemy planes and their binoculars, and they watched the skies to be sure that we were not going to be bombarded by some enemy plane that had gotten as far as Fort Wayne, Indiana. But they felt very important and very patriotic.
It's stuck up above every other building in the city, so it was really kind of the center of attraction for downtown. You certainly could not miss it. And you would come in and just look into the building, look into the center atrium here of the building and admire what it was.
I've always believed that it survived because people connected with that sense of can-do, that survival spirit. And there's something elevating about that building, that wonderful tower that leaps out of the street into the sky. It was the tallest building in Indiana for a very long time, with its light at the top that they've relighted and send around now. It's a beacon for Fort Wayne. And when people can own that kind of memory, then the building will be preserved.
It is impossible to imagine downtown Fort Wayne without this building's grand detail, matching colors, intricate metalwork, and carved limestone. In recent years, the Lincoln Tower sat mostly empty and seemed on the verge of being declared useless. But due to a new owner, John Tipman, and a new major tenant, Tower Bank, it is contributing to a renewed spirit to keep the downtown area alive and vibrant.